Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. I've been working in PR throughout my long career, and I have a special interest in personal branding. It's what makes you stand out from everyone else who does the same thing that you do, and it attracts people to what you have to offer. It also can repel the people that you don't really want to do business with, just like a magnet, actually. I'm a keynote speaker, an author, and a columnist for the Forbes Agency Council and Main Biz. My audiences have said that me helping them think about their superpowers have changed the way they think about their careers and their lives, actually. I hope you like this episode, and I hope you'll share it with other people who might be interested in hearing it. And I'm very excited about today's guests, Kelsey and Derrick Ogletree, who are the founders of Pitchcraft. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, Kelsey and Derrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
nice to have you here. Pitchcraft was founded in 2021 by husband and wife team Derrick and Kelsey Ogletree, who live in Florence, Alabama, with their 1-year-old son, Asher. I can't wait to meet Asher because I'm the mom of 2 sons too, who are grown up now. Having grown up in small towns and with strong family values, they're passionate about bringing people together in meaningful, authentic ways. Through Pitchcraft, they aim to help restore integrity and accountability to the media industry through putting people first. Kelsey, who's CEO of Pitchcraft, is a Medill-trained independent journalist whose work has appeared in many print and digital outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Travel and Leisure, AARP the magazine, and many others. Derrick, COO of Pitchcraft, is a graduate of the University of Alabama who previously spent over a decade in corporate finance. So Kelsey and Derrick, first of all, I'm very excited to introduce you as the new sponsors of the PR Maven podcast. Thank you and congratulations. And tell us about Pitchcraft and why you started it in the first place.
Sure. So Pitchcraft is the people-focused PR platform. And Derrick and I started this several years ago as a membership community for PR professionals, providing content and resources to really help them to better their relationships with writers and editors that will in turn drive better connections and more earned media placements for their clients. And we approach this from a really different perspective, I think, than a lot of other PR resources out there, because my background is that I'm a journalist. So I have lived it from the other side, being an editor for various travel and business publications over the years, and as a freelance writer on the side now since 2017. I really saw a huge shift in media around 2020 when the pandemic began, of just a huge increase in volume of pitches and less focus on quality, and just a really transactional approach to PR, getting in touch with journalists, like pushing a lot of stories out there without really giving a lot of thought to who they were sending it to. And I just felt like the industry was really due for a little bit of a shakeup, where we return to this value of focusing on people and putting your connections first. And Nancy, I know you and I had talked about previously how you had this Rolodex, from years ago, and who you knew was everything in PR. And I really think that it's time we come back to that again and really put the people first. There's so many ways to find journalist emails, and it's so easy to send out blast pitches to every journalist that you can find. But I think what we're seeing is that, number one, writers and editors are inundated and just drowning in email pitches. Most of them are poor quality or not a fit for them. And on the other side, I mean, PR is kind of exhausting themselves just trying to find, always the next thing, always more journalists, always more publications. And it's exhausting to try to keep up. So in Pitchcraft, we really talk about a focused approach and, focusing over quality, focusing on finding the right people to send your story to. And I think we're different in that we run this platform from a journalist perspective, and we prioritize community, collaboration, relationships, not only between PR and writers and editors, but among PR as well. And I think, me personally, like, I've seen so much competition in that space previously. So this is kind of almost a radical, but like returning to a little bit more traditional at the same time, of really collaborating on pitches and helping each other out, sharing contacts. These are kind of all the things we foster within Pitchcraft. And one other thing that makes us different is that we really focus on providing ongoing support, like not only through our resources like journalist interviews and live editor workshops and group gatherings among our community and things like that, but also through kind of a broader guidance around growing your business and doing so in a way that allows you to integrate your work in your life, right? Because I think our industry can be go, go, go. Like we always have to be responding to emails 24/7, very frantic pace. And we're really trying to help people find more of that balance and sort of mentor them toward, like, you can set boundaries in this space and you can create a business or like an approach to PR that makes you happy and that makes you excited to do that every day because of the people and relationships you're building.
Well, I love that because your philosophy is so much in alignment with my own philosophy. Because I mean, I was always a relationship builder, and it's been my relationships that have made my career successful, I believe. So um, I was really happy to find Pitchcraft, and I'm really happy to be getting to know both of you. So, Derrick, I
Yeah.
mean, you want
And
to
I,
chime in about the business aspect of Pitchcraft?
yeah, and I was going to say another differentiator between us is we're really lifestyle focused. So the main focus areas and categories that we cover are food, travel, home, health, wellness, fashion, and beauty. And we kind of stray outside of those every once in a while with, more business focused categories and some others. But for the most part, we're lifestyle focused. And then another thing I think makes us different is, you know, we offer flexible payments. So a lot of the PR platforms out there want to lock you into a long term commitment, and I've never wanted to lock someone into something like that, especially if they don't want to be here. So we offer a month-to-month payment, which is $349 a month, and then we also, if you want to stick with it long term, we do have um, an annual option, which is 35.88 for the year, and that basically breaks down to $299 a month. So I just think that allows people to join the platform, make sure they're going to have the time to commit to it so they can start seeing results without having to have a huge investment up front. And I thought it'd be, Chelsea, I thought if you mentioned like how this originally started back during the pandemic, that people would find that interesting.
Yeah, so I guess the way that Pitchcraft originally started was in March 2020. I found a big discrepancy right when the pandemic started of PR saying like, should we still be pitching journalists? And journalists were saying, I don't know if I should still be pitching editors, and editors didn't really know what to cover. And so I just decided on a whim one day to put together a Zoom call, and I put it in my newsletter and said, like, if anyone on any side of media would like to join the Zoom call, we're just going to come together for a quick call and like talk about what's going on. And I sent this out, and in like 5 minutes, I had 100 people sign up for this call. And so then I kind of panicked, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to do Zoom. I've never done a Zoom in my life at that point. And it's funny now because I live on Zoom, like a lot of us do. But that was kind of the start of it. And then it evolved from there, where I was talking exclusively at that time. And then I started bringing in other journalists, and then we started charging monthly fees to attend our workshops. And then it kind of evolved into, we decided to launch this into an all-in-one membership platform that really combined these live workshops and a community aspect as well.
Yeah, so that was a big leap for the two of you. I mean, you had so many changes going on in your lives with the pandemic, and then starting a business, and then having your son. So you've been through a huge change in the past 4 years.
Well, and in the middle of that too, we also moved from living in the middle of the city of Chicago to kind of rural Alabama. So we really did a 360.
And you're still smiling. Oh, and Derrick, did you want to mention that for people listening, the members of the PRMAVEN Nation, you've got a special offer today?
Yes, we can use the coupon code at pitchcraft.media. You can go to our checkout from there. And we'll give you $200 off your first month. That's why it's not, a huge commitment. You can check out our platform, see what it's about. I can give you an onboarding to walk you through the different sections. But if you use the code PRMAVEN, all one word, all uppercase, that'll give you $200 off your first month.
Well, that's very generous of you. And I hope people will join in because, I feel like you guys are sponsoring the podcast, and I have sort of a community of people that listen to PRMAVEN podcast. And now I know you have your Pitchcraft community. So I feel like we're kind of bringing our communities together, which makes me really happy. Because I was born to connect humans. Like, I feel like I was born, my superpower is making connections. So this connection makes me really happy.
Well, I remember the first time we spoke in our demo that I think you mentioned relationship building before I had a chance to. So that's how I know people are the perfect fit.
That's awesome, Derrick. I'm glad you remember that. So my next question, some people feel that PR is less important now because of social media. And actually there's some, nationally renowned speakers. I'm not even going to mention their name, but they'll sometimes talk about how like PR is irrelevant now. And I'm like, it's not, it's more relevant than ever. What do you feel about the future of PR?
That's a great question, Nancy. And I echo what you just said. That's been in my, little notes here, is that from our perspective, PR is more important than ever. But now the big thing is we're really seeing this huge need for diversification in media strategy. So we're not talking about, simply like pitching media and getting stories out there, but really expanding PR skill sets to include things like guidance on social media strategy, overseeing owned media channels like newsletters and blogs, partnerships with content creators and other brands, collaborations, affiliate platform knowledge for certain clients or brands if they have products, and really like focusing on amplification through less traditional media channels such as podcasts and live streaming services. And obviously just talking about that, it sounds like so much to navigate and so much to learn. And that's another big reason we built Pitchcraft is, we're saving our members time by bringing all this information to them, both through our own, research and intel that we're bringing to this and our experiences, as well as speakers and external people and our community. So really everyone is benefiting from the collective knowledge of everyone else within Pitchcraft, which is really huge. And I really think, just to echo this again, like in this new world of media, relationships are the currency here. And that's why we believe so strongly that what we're doing works. And I have a great example to share that just came up recently. We had a a session focused on weddings related editors. And we had the editor of that section for the New York Times come on to a live workshop with us. And she connected with one of our members, Brian, who ended up getting a print story in the New York Times, which has very long legs. This ran 4 months ago, and he's still getting dozens of client bookings from the article. And it's actually even led him to expand his business into a new area because of some suggestions that have all come from this New York Times article. So, it's really just creating this web of like opportunity for people that just keeps expanding all through these connections, and just, sharing, being transparent about, what editors need, what PR needs, what writer needs, really sharing that with each other and seeing how we can help one another rather than always just being self-serving about, what our own personal goals are.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And the fact that, again, the New York Times has such credibility and legitimacy. It's one thing if Brian had put something out on his own Instagram or his own LinkedIn or his own social media. I mean, but as soon as the New York Times puts out a story, all of a sudden, I mean, that not only brings you to a huge audience, but again, gives your story so much credibility.
And I think that social media is more of a marketing tool. It's not really going to tell your story. It might sell some products for you, but the real storytelling is with the media and making those relationships and connections with journalists.
Right. So again, I mean, relationships between PR professionals and journalists. And as you pointed out, Kelsey, even having PR professionals build relationships among each other so they can help each other. Again, the relationships are so incredibly important. And I will say also, I feel that so many people during the pandemic were in isolation and kind of lost their relationship skills. I think they can use all the help they can get sometimes.
Yes. Well, I feel like that, especially like the year or two after the pandemic, I feel like people were really closed off and they'd kind of blow you off on meetings, but it seems like at least this past year people are, breaking back out of their shell and they're not as, shy and recluse as they were during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, I actually developed a keynote speech that I'm giving now about the value of having people who know, like, and trust you, and how to be a person who others will know, like, and trust. So, Kelsey, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I think, what I was going to say is that, we're talking to dozens of journalists, writers, and editors every month. And one thing that I'm increasingly seeing that's different in the past year compared to like several years ago is that people are wanting to be invited to events again. They're wanting to go to coffee with people. I had a writer say like, oh, some PR have been asking me to like meet up for manicures in New York City. And I love that because this is a chance to really get to know each other like on a human level. And we're not getting together so that you can just pitch me on your clients the whole time. Like maybe you don't even bring up your clients during that experience, but you're just out almost as friends, like getting to know each other, doing something together. And then afterward you send a follow-up where you're like, this is my client list, like maybe this one could be of interest to you in the future, like happy to be a resource to you going forward. I think it's really about kind of that soft, like people focused approach rather than the hard pitch now. And that's a big shift that I saw, during 2020. I was doing so many freelance assignments. I was doing like 10 to 15 stories a week. And it was all about, okay, how can we get this source interviewed as soon as possible, get this content up as soon as possible to help people navigate different aspects of the pandemic. And now I think we're just seeing a little bit of a slowdown where it's like, okay, let's get to know each other first. Like, let's really find a good story angle that would be a fit. Let's be more thoughtful about our approach rather than this like frantic pace. And I'm very happy to see that. And that's something we really try to facilitate within our Pitchcraft community too. And I think it's just important to know that like even the most thoughtfully crafted email is never going to compare to like having gotten to know someone personally, or maybe you've seen them in person, even if you've met up for a 20-minute Zoom conversation just to talk. that's always going to help you stick out more in that journalist's mind than just like popping into their inbox, no matter how good your idea is.
And the other thing is when you get to know a certain journalist's beat, so to speak, if you can sometimes be providing them with story ideas from people that aren't even your clients, or send them a link to a story that might be of interest to them. I know that journalists will really appreciate that if I'm helping them, and it's not even something that I'm getting paid to do. And the other thing that I've done in the past is sometimes journalists need 3 examples of a certain business or product. So if you're pitching your own, and you could say, here's 2 other examples in this same space. And I would try to choose non-competitive brands. And the journalists will really appreciate that as well, because of course, they're always under deadline pressure also, and trying to get a lot done. And a lot of journalists now are, they're not really specialists in one particular area. So in any given day, especially like TV people, they might have to be covering real estate, healthcare, insurance, and so the more you can help them, the better off you'll be.
Exactly. And I like that you mentioned that about how if you see something that reminds them or reminds you of them, even if it's not self-serving, of you or your clients in any way, that is a big thing that you can do in terms of building relationships. And that's actually one thing that we include. We have a free download if anyone's interested about the top ways to build relationships with journalists. And it's a pretty little guide book that you can download. We can have Nancy link to it in the show notes below so you can grab a copy. But that is one of the things that we mention there as well. And I mean, I know Nancy, like you and I even do that just over email. Like I saw this really cool woman who writes about cars from like the female perspective. And I sent it your way the other day for one of your clients, and you were like, oh, I've never heard of her. This could be a cool fit. And, it was just something random, but because you and I know each other, it made me think of you when I saw her. And so I think just being thoughtful about that, and really, I mean, I think that a lot of writers will say to me like, oh, PR people are my friends too, and that's really the kind of relationship it becomes, because you do get to know each other, especially in the lifestyle space. Like we're writing about fun stuff, we're not doing like medical studies. And, for the most part, this isn't life-changing topics, but we're talking about fun things like travel and food and restaurants and beauty. And, these are fun topics to get to know each other through that. And it's fun to be able to connect with people on that personal level that also applies to their work too.
Absolutely. And along those lines, I want to give a shout out to Elaine Theriot Courier, who is a friend of mine from the state of Maine. And she was involved with the Pitchcraft community, and she's the one who told me about it. And as a result, I joined along with several people from Marshall Communications. And that's how I met you guys in the first place. And look at what it's led to with the sponsorship. So, and Elaine, I feel like she's a really talented publicist, and she's done a really great job in the food space with her clients. So shout out to Elaine. And we're going to take a short break now. We'll be back with more from Kelsey and Derrick Ogletree on the PRMAVEN podcast. And now you're going to hear a video all about Pitchcraft from Kelsey and Derrick.
My name is Kelsey Ogletree.
I'm Derrick Ogletree.
And we co-founded Pitchcraft to put the relationships back in public relations. I've been a journalist for about 10 years now and was laid off from my job as an editor in 2017. I decided to take the plunge into freelance writing, and really what I noticed starting in 2020 is that public relations professionals started scrambling to really figure out how to pitch stories to writers and editors during the pandemic. So that's when we really started developing the concept for Pitchcraft, which is a month-to-month membership platform really focused on helping public relations professionals build those relationships with independent journalists and editors. By joining Pitchcraft, you could save hours of research time week to week. You'll get the opportunity to personally get to know a new freelance writer every week. the opportunity to interface with editors and writers live in monthly pop-up discussions, the chance to build community with the rest of our members in weekly calls, access to e-commerce and affiliate resources, a master pitching calendar, and more. We'd love to show you how Pitchcraft can become an essential part of your PR toolkit. If you like the sound of that, book a demo with us today.
I want to now get into some nitty gritty of PR with our guests, Kelsey and Derrick Ogletree. And Kelsey, I think I'm going to ask you this question. What is a pitch exactly, and what constitutes a good pitch?
So a pitch in 2024 is sent via email. I think overwhelmingly we hear from people that they'll hear from PR in their DMs on Instagram, LinkedIn, and overall, maybe you can let people know you've sent them a pitch through there, but the actual pitch needs to come through an email. If you don't know the journalist, or if you have maybe like a warm relationship, but you don't know them super well, you should always reach out. I would recommend saying hello, make sure to spell their name correctly. It's always good to put 1 or 2 sentences of some kind of personal connection. Maybe I read your recent story on this and I really liked this point about it, or, I noticed you have a dog and I have the same kind of dog, or, something like that, that shows that maybe you've done a little bit of research about their work and their personal life on social media. And then be, just really clear about what you are sending their way. Why are you reaching out to them specifically? And what story angle do you have for them? Like, make sure you're pitching an actual angle and not just a thing that exists. So your angle should be, newsworthy, have some sort of timely hook. It should include a link to whatever you're talking about so that they don't have to go research where that is. I always recommend that people put in the location of whatever it is they're talking about, because, sometimes I'll get a pitch for, say, like a restaurant, and it never says in the body, like, this restaurant is in Portland, Maine, and I don't know every restaurant out there, obviously. So don't forget the basic facts, like who, what, when, where, why, and be concise about that. Make sure you're including the angle there. And I think the big thing that's really important is to show, like, why should this matter to a broader audience and not just you? Say your restaurant owner is doing, some new technique. Well, why should we care? Okay, well, maybe this is taken from, some tradition in Europe that's now translating into this type of restaurant in the US, and it's a trickle down effect and your chef is leading that, or something. Like, it has to have a broader story than just this person is doing a thing. And I think right now, more important than ever is including data in a pitch. So, people really like to know that something is newsworthy because it's a trend, because it's on the rise, because people are searching for it. And, you have to remember that writers are always trying to pitch editors things that make their editors look good. They're trying to get pitch stories that will get them a commission. So in order to do that, they are always focusing on driving traffic to their website or their, video channel or their podcast or whatever it might be. What's going to attract eyeballs? And, the answer to that is always things that are trending that people are talking about. And so using tools like Google Trends to pull that data, using, reports from sites with good reputations in terms of research, or even pulling things from social. So say you have a TikTok video that you found that has 10 million views on something, and that demonstrates that what you're pitching actually is, reaching critical mass. Like, I think that including that piece of data in your pitch, just through a couple of links or maybe an embed, is a really, really important part of pitches right now in 2024. And then, just always, leave it open-ended at the end. Like, say, can I connect you for an interview? Can I provide more information? Would you like to set up a Zoom? Ask some sort of call to action, and make sure you have included that timely hook in there about why it matters now. And then kind of leave that open for the journalist to do something with it. And I would say too, really important is make sure you use a clear subject line. Some people, try to catch attention with clever subject lines, which is okay, but make sure you're actually like communicating what is in there, because, when we're looking at our Gmails of like 50 emails per page in one day, my emails can easily spill onto 3 pages. So I'm scanning the subject lines to see Is this personalized to me at all? One thing I will say that catches my attention is putting an emoji at the front of the subject line if it fits the pitch, because it just stands out in an inbox full of text. If there's a little photo, sometimes I'll click on it if it sounds interesting to me.
Well, that's a great example. I hadn't really thought of putting an emoji in a subject line, but that's a great idea.
That's one thing we do within Pitchcraft too. All of our emails, we always have, our color is purple. So we always have the purple heart at the beginning, and people have commented to us that it really makes them stand out when they're receiving emails from us.
It's funny now that I guess I hadn't really thought of that, but now that you say that, it's like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Now you talked about newsworthy, and the definition of newsworthy actually changes day to day, depending on what's happening in the news, right? I mean, newsworthiness on a slow news day is different from the day that something terrible is happening. Like you mentioned, there might be a tornado happening where you are sometime soon, hopefully not too soon. But yeah, how do you define what is newsworthy, Kelsey?
To me, it all comes down to the zoom out. Like whatever your client is doing is probably great for them and their little circle, but what's the bigger picture when you take a step back? And a good publicist is always going to be able to do that. And not only, communicate that to a journalist, but talk to your client about it too. And be able to say, okay, like, here's what you're doing, but here's what why it matters on a broader scale. And I think that whatever you're pitching really has to impact more than just the person you're pitching for it to be even considered by an editor or a writer to cover. So, always be thinking of that as you're putting together your pitch. Like, what is the broader impact of this for your town, for your, region, for your state, for the country, whatever it might be, and really try to include that in a concise way in your pitch.
Okay, cool. There's also something called newsjacking, which is sort of like jumping or hijacking somebody else's story and trying to maybe localize it. So if there's something national that's happening, if you can give an example in your own market for a regional journalist, that's something that I've been able to use pretty successfully in the past.
Yeah, that's really smart.
So how do people, this is something that I had to learn early on, because I sometimes can be like a bulldozer when I have a mission. How can PR people walk the line between being assertive for their clients and employers and being a nag or a pain to journalists?
Derrick, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that?
Well, I know one thing is follow-ups. Like most of the interviews we've had with journalists, they do want follow-ups, but that doesn't mean that you need to follow up with them every day or multiple times a day. Send your pitch, follow up a week or two after, and then maybe a week or two after that. So my rule of thumb is when I'm following up with people, it's usually 3 or 4 times. After that, I can pretty much assume that maybe it's not interested, or maybe it's not just a fit at this time. But a lot of those journalists, keep their inbox pretty well maintained. So if that's going to be a fit later on, they can easily search their inbox for those key terms, and it may come up again for a story down the road.
Yeah, I was going to mention a no response doesn't necessarily equal a no. It can just be a not right now. And, we hear stories all the time of people following up with publicists a year after their pitch of, oh, I actually do have a fit for this now. Like, are you still working with them? So, I mean, in general, I would say like 2 follow-ups. If you don't hear back, like take a little step back and then maybe try again with a different angle or a different approach. I would say the bottom line, though, is really remember this is a long game. And I know, this is something that well, Nancy. But, if you have a big piece of client news coming up in a week, like it's pretty hard to just push that out cold to a bunch of journalists and have high expectations for people who are going to cover it. When you're in those urgent situations, you really need to turn to those journalists you have relationships with already. And maybe you can be successful in that way. But I would say, if you have a big story coming up, like really try to get ahead with your clients. Like, okay, what are the big pieces of news we have coming up this quarter or this year? And what will the timeframes of those be? And then sit down with your calendar and just try to plan way ahead. we are hearing that lead times are increasingly getting longer for digital as well. I mean, the standard is like really 2 to 3 months for digital now as well, unless it's like a quick news story, of course, but more of like the feature and trend pieces are longer lead times. And for print, of course, we're seeing like 6 months and up for lead time. So, you really need to be thinking ahead with that. And, most of the time we hear from editors, like it's never too early to send a pitch about something you have coming up, just to put it on our radars. And then, you can always follow up closer to when it's time to pursue a story, do an interview, things like that, get the assets. But, yeah, I would just say, like, for example, what not to do. I had someone pitch me like a baby related product, and I responded to one of her emails with some questions, and she has emailed me 3 more times in the past like 4 days. And that's really off putting, because I'm like, okay, she's coming across as desperate here, because I mean, this isn't a groundbreaking story. It's a baby product, So, that would be what not to do. I would say, like, more of the soft approach is really going to get you farther and be more successful.
Yeah. So along those lines, Derrick, do you have advice for PR people on crafting and delivering the perfect pitch?
Yeah, I think one thing we try to do in Pitchcraft is change people's mindsets so they are focused on relationship building. And when Kelsey mentioned earlier in your pitch, mentioned some of their previous work, or if they have a dog, or something that you can relate to them, but don't do it because you think they're gonna open your email because of it. Read about them, find out more about them because you want to. Do you want to build those authentic relationships? I think the relationship building, it's not just about, what they can do for you, but rather what, unique stories you can tell together, how this relationship can build into more of a friendship, where your conversations with them aren't just about business, aren't just about work. And then I think thirdly, how can you each introduce each other to the people in the media, whether it's on the PR side or the journalism side? How can you introduce each other um, to others in the community who are open to that same commitment and about relationship building? Because I tell everyone when I'm on our demos, we have office hours, which are weekly interviews with journalists. I tell them you should watch them all. You should find out a point or two about them, and you should email them and just start building those connections. Even if, they're not a perfect fit for your clients, you never know where they could be down the road, who they could introduce you to. So, I think that's a big missed opportunity if people in Pitchcraft don't do that, because it's 20 minutes of your time in a simple email.
Right, exactly. That's great. Yeah, I think that one of the big themes of our conversation today is um, you don't want to be that person who's always asking for something. You want to add value to the journalists' lives as much as you can.
Yes. And we want people in Pitchcraft to give more than they take, especially within the community. If you're asking for, people's contact information, give more than you take.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very glad that I found Pitchcraft, and again, I'll give a shout out to Elaine Terrio Courier, and I just love the community, and it's been so nice to spend time today with you. And I'm so excited about Pitchcraft being the sponsor of the PRMAVEN podcast.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And,
Thank you.
I think other PR software tools are larger companies, but, it's Kelsey and I who run this, and people have access to us when they have issues or questions. And I think that's a big differentiator as well.
Yeah, you're real authentic people.
Yes.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. So our website is pitchcraft.media, and we also have a great resource on our blog, with a ton of different articles and helpful resources for free, which is at blog.pitchcraft.media. And you can follow us on LinkedIn. We post a lot of content there, just Pitchcraft. And then Derrick and I are Kelsey at pitchcraft.media and Derrick at pitchcraft.media. It's DERRICK.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure chatting with both of you. And I look forward to continuing our authentic relationship.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So have a great day. And thanks to everybody in PR Maven Nation for joining us today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the PR Maven podcast. I invite you to share a review of the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation on Facebook. It's free to join, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you use an Alexa device, use your Alexa app to search the Skills and Games section to find and enable the PR Maven Podcast Flash Briefing. This will give you access to exclusive content and more PR and marketing advice. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.